Okay, I want to talk about using Moodle restrictions not just to hide and unhide things, but to use it as a true differentiation tool for your classroom. And I'm going to use my Chapter 7 fight as an example. Right now it's unhidden and I haven't gotten to the restrictions for that. But I've got my Chapter 7 fight. I use the word fight because it's gamified test. My Chapter 7 test right now is made for the core set of students in my classroom. It has all the questions that I would want to ask and all the setup that I would want to ask. But what's the difference then for my IEP or my 504 students is that I don't want them to take the exact same test. I want them to have a streamed down version of the test so that they have the time that they need in my classroom. So how do I make that work? I'm going to turn editing on. And I'm going to go down here and I've got my Chapter 7 test. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it. So I've got two Chapter 7 tests now that are in there. And the first one is the one that's going to be for a majority of my students. So I'm going to go to that one first. And I'm going to go to my settings. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to do my access. Okay, so what do they have to do in order to enter this? So the first thing is they have to have done the previous activity in order to even see it. That's for everyone. But now I want it to be the one that everyone except for my 504 and IEP students see. So I'm going to add another restriction, but this time it's a restriction set. And when I do sets, it means it allows me to put multiple things together. So I'm going to say restriction set. And now it says, please set the restrictions. So my first one is that the group 504, and then I'm going to say group IEP, and everybody's got those. And I'm going to say must not match any of these. So if you're in 504 IEP, you won't see this. So students must not match any of the following. I'm going to poke it in the eye. They don't need to know that there's a difference, right? So in order to get into this now, it's restricted to have to have done the previous thing and must not match any of the following, 504 or IEP. And I'm going to save and return to course. And in all honesty, now is when it'd be better for me to copy it because, in fact, I'm going to delete this one. I'll show you what I mean. Why when I say this is a now, the reason I can go and say duplicate now. When it duplicates all the restrictions, but now I'm going to go in and do the opposite of what I just did. The first one says you do not belong to those. I'm going to go and edit those settings, and I'm going to go down here, and on the restrict access, must match any of these. So now, it's exactly the opposite. So I'm going to save and return to course. And I'm going to look down here. And when I look down here, it says, hey, test number 1, you do not belong to that or you do not belong to that. Now this one says you belong to this or you belong to this. I'm going to name it exactly the same thing. It's not going to say copy. Now every student sees, they either see this Chapter 7 fight or they see this Chapter 7 fight, and right now they're exactly the same fight. I'm going to go back into it. And now I'm going to edit the quiz, and I'm going to now decide out of these questions that are on here, there's currently 31 questions on here. This is the test. Which ones are most appropriate for my 504 and IEP students? So I start with the whole thing done, and then I eliminate questions that I think are inappropriate or I've repeated them in some other way, and I go through. So I might say, hey, I want to remove that question and this question and this question because true and false questions tend to be one of the hardest things for limited readers to get the nuance of. So I don't like true or false questions that are kind of tricky for some students, and if you're a limited reader, that might not be the one. So I would go through here and delete some percentage. And in general, I eliminate between a third and a half of the questions, depending on the difficulty and the length of the test that it was built to be in the first place for my 504 and IEP students. I also try to make sure that all the questions that are on the 504 and IEP test are read to my students. And I'm going to look here and see if I've done that with this one. Nope, that one's not a read to you question. Actually, that's one of the ones that should be thrown away. Let's see if this one is. Nope, that one's not a read to me question. I'm not giving a good example. There's a read to me question. Okay, so the ones that are supposed to, and this isn't my actual one, I've already done it with chapter 7. All of those then.
Solid state drives are categorized as QLC, TLC, MLC.
You can see the students have the ability to have the entire test read to them. Now, they don't have the ability to have these little sections down here that they're dragging up, but those are 3 letters. And in general, I don't think many of the students have a problem reading that. By the way, they're all LC. So a Q, an M, an S, or a T, they've got that down. So all my ones that are for 504 or IEP students, I do the recording thing to make sure that those students don't have to be pulled out and taken down to another room. They still can, obviously. But if they want to stay in my room and they've got headphones and all the students, on the ones that are read to them, all the students have the ability to have those read to them, have the ability to then have not only now the test is differentiated, they get a totally different test, a trimmed down version, if you will, of the test, but I make sure all the questions that stayed on the test for my 504 and IEP students are also questions that I have edited to make sure they're all 100% read to the students as well. Now that's one way you can do differentiation in your classroom for, in particular, quizzes and fights. But I can also do the same thing with projects. Let's say this project right here is very intensive, and I want to make a different project for my students that are on 504 IEPs. I can take that same project, I can duplicate it, and then I can add the same restriction set that I did and say, hey, this is for non-504, non-IEP, this one's for 504 IEP. I can do and say, hey, this is for all my gifted students, to add activities that they need to do that follow along with my plan for all my gifted students in my classroom. And I can do that all automatically on Moodle so the students see different things based on, and let me go in on this one in particular. I'm going to edit settings again, and I'm going to go to that restrict access. Now, right now we've got it so that it's just the previous thing. I can add another one. Now I can do it based on groups. I can also do it based on grades. Hey, how are you doing in my class right now? I can say, you know what, the current, let's see how you're doing on 2 formative means second quarter formative grade. I can do any category that's inside my gradebook. Usually I got a bunch, and any individual thing. So if I said, hey, how did you do on, I'm going way out there, chapter 4 fight, you could only see this if you had a grade below 70, then you're going to see this intervention activity for you. So you could have things show up based on poor performance on a particular other thing, on excellent performance on a particular other thing. The restriction set thing is really amazing. The amount of things you can put on there. You can put it on the first letter of the last name. If you want to make sure only Jim Thomas can see this thing, you could say, you can go that far into the minutia with restrictions, and that's in the user profile settings. There's a whole bunch of user profile things that I can put in here as well on the restrictions. I'm going to go ahead and knock this off so I don't have it there. But you can see if you play with restrictions just a little bit, you can make copies of things within your course, modify them based on groups, grades, what town they live in. Do they live in New Paris, West Manchester? It's up to you. The number of ways you can differentiate things out using the restriction sets. I could spend a lot of time talking about restrictions. What I really think you should do is take a look at them, and we can set up a time if you need some more clarification doing any of these things one-on-one using Moodle restrictions.